I'm Samantha Johnson, 26 years old, raised in a middle-class suburban Chicago family where I never quite measured up to my siblings in my mother's eyes. Growing up, I constantly felt like the family disappointment, despite my best efforts. Last year, during what should have been a normal family dinner, my world imploded when my mother screamed those unforgivable words that changed everything. Walking out that door was the hardest thing I've ever done, but what happened afterward shocked us all. Before I share how my life fell apart and then came back together in ways I never imagined, let me know where you're watching from in the comments and hit that subscribe button if you've ever felt misunderstood by the people who should love you most. Let me paint you a picture of the Johnson family. My father, James, built his accounting firm from scratch, working 60-hour weeks for as long as I can remember. His physical presence at home rarely translated to emotional availability. My mother, Patricia, abandoned her teaching career to raise us, channeling all her perfectionist tendencies into creating the ideal family image. Every surface in our house gleamed, every meal was Instagram-worthy before Instagram existed, and every child was expected to uphold the Johnson family reputation. That's where the problems began for me. My older sister Heather, now 32, was the academic superstar. National Merit Scholar, Yale undergraduate, law degree from Columbia, now a corporate attorney at a prestigious Chicago firm. My younger brother Kyle, 23, was the golden boy, varsity quarterback, student body president, and now finishing his MBA at Northwestern on a partial scholarship. And then there was me, Samantha, perpetually caught in the middle. I wasn't unintelligent or unsuccessful by normal standards. I graduated with a 3.4 GPA, earned a marketing degree from Illinois State, and secured a decent job at a mid-sized marketing firm in Chicago. But in the Johnson household, decent might as well have been failure. My interests in art, creative writing, and photography were dismissed as hobbies rather than legitimate pursuits. My father called them nice distractions, while my mother referred to them as phases I would eventually outgrow. The pattern established itself early. When I was 12, I won a regional art competition. My watercolor painting was selected from hundreds of entries to be displayed at the Chicago Cultural Center. The day of the awards ceremony coincided with Kyle's soccer championship. Guess where my parents were? I stood alone accepting my certificate while a friend's mother took photos. That evening, Kyle's victory was celebrated with his favorite dinner and a special cake. My award wasn't mentioned until I brought it up, only to receive a distracted, "That's nice, honey," from my mother as she refilled Kyle's glass. Then came college acceptances. Heather's Yale admission was legendary in our family lore. My parents threw a party, invited extended family and neighbors, and my father commissioned a custom cake with a Yale bulldog. When my Illinois State acceptance arrived, my mother frowned and said, "Well, at least it's a 4-year school," while my father asked if I'd considered applying to more competitive programs. The acceptance letter was placed in a drawer rather than proudly displayed on the refrigerator, like Heather's had been. Perhaps the most painful memory was my 21st birthday, which fell during the week of Heather's law school graduation. Not only did we travel to New York for the ceremony, completely missing my birthday, but when I gently reminded my mother over breakfast at the hotel, she looked genuinely surprised. "Oh, that's right. We'll celebrate when we get home." We never did. Over time, I developed mechanisms to cope with being the family disappointment. I withdrew, sharing less about my life and accomplishments to avoid the inevitable comparisons or dismissals. I sought validation elsewhere, primarily from my best friend Ashley, who lived next door throughout childhood. She witnessed the dynamic firsthand and became my emotional anchor. Most significantly, I learned to hide my true feelings behind a mask of indifference. "It doesn't matter" became my mantra, even when it mattered deeply. By the time I reached my mid-20s, I had established a life separate from my family. I shared an apartment with 2 roommates in Wicker Park, a vibrant Chicago neighborhood my mother deemed unsafe, despite its actual safety record. I worked at Bright Path Marketing, focusing on digital campaigns for small businesses. The pay wasn't spectacular, but I loved the creative aspects of my job and the collaborative team environment. My parents viewed my career with thinly veiled disappointment. Marketing is just glorified advertising, my father once commented at a family dinner. My mother regularly forwarded job postings for positions at larger firms or companies with better reputations. Neither of them understood that I valued the creative freedom and work-life balance my current position offered. Despite living only 30 minutes from my parents' house, I limited my visits to major holidays and occasional Sunday dinners. Each visit left me emotionally drained, fielding questions about when I might go to graduate school like Kyle, or why I couldn't find a nice boyfriend from a good family like Heather's husband Thomas. No accomplishment of mine was ever quite enough. Ashley remained my constant supporter. "Your family is certifiably nuts," she would say after particularly difficult visits. "You realize that in any other context, you'd be considered wildly successful, right? College degree, good job, nice apartment, no criminal record? That's winning at life, Sam." I knew she was right, but something about family has a way of worming past rational thought and striking at your core insecurities. No matter how many times my boss praised my creativity or friends valued my loyalty, my family's perception of me as the underachiever lingered like a shadow I couldn't outrun. Little did I know that shadow was about to get much darker. It was a crisp October evening when my mother called, her voice carrying that formal tone reserved for announcements. "We're having a family dinner this Saturday. Your father and I need to discuss something important with everyone." Immediately, my stomach knotted. In Johnson family vernacular, something important could range from health scares to property purchases to major disappointments that required group intervention. My mind raced through possibilities. Had Dad's recent medical checkup revealed something concerning? Were they finally selling the house to retire somewhere warmer? Or, most dreadfully, had they somehow discovered my recent rejection from the graduate program I'd applied to secretly, hoping to finally earn their approval? "What's it about?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Just be here at 6, my mother replied, ignoring my question entirely. "And wear something appropriate, please. Not those ripped jeans you had on last time." For the record, they weren't ripped jeans but designer distressed denim that had cost me nearly a week's salary. The distinction would have been lost on Patricia Johnson. As Saturday approached, my anxiety escalated. Twice I drafted texts canceling my attendance, citing work emergencies. Twice I deleted them, knowing the repercussions would be worse than whatever awaited me. The day of the dinner, I spent 45 minutes selecting an outfit that would meet my mother's approval, a conservative navy blue dress with modest heels and minimal jewelry. I even straightened my naturally curly hair, knowing my mother preferred it that way, claiming it looked more professional. The 20-minute drive to my parents' suburban home felt like hours. I rehearsed neutral topics of conversation and prepared deflections for the usual barrage of questions about my romantic life and career trajectory. At a red light, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror and barely recognized the tense, anxious woman staring back. "Just get through dinner," I whispered to myself. "4 hours max, then you're free." Pulling into the familiar driveway, I noticed both Heather's luxury SUV and Kyle's sports car already parked. Great. I was the last to arrive, another minor failure to add to my ledger. My mother opened the door before I could knock, her eyes immediately scanning my appearance. "You're late," she said by way of greeting. "By 3 minutes," I replied, checking my watch. Traffic on Lakeshore was backed up. "Everyone else managed to arrive on time," she sniffed, stepping aside to let me enter. "You should have planned better." And so it began. In the living room, Dad was mixing drinks while Heather and Kyle sat on opposite ends of the sofa, engrossed in their phones. They looked up briefly as I entered, offering perfunctory greetings before returning to their screens. I moved to kiss my father's cheek, and he patted my shoulder awkwardly. "The usual?" he asked, gesturing to the bar cart. I nodded, grateful for the promised glass of wine. I'd need it. Samantha finally decided to join us, my mother announced to the room, though everyone had clearly seen me enter. "Now we can move to the dining room." Dinner began with the usual uncomfortable small talk. Heather discussed a high-profile case her firm was handling, carefully omitting confidential details while ensuring we understood the magnitude of her responsibility. Kyle detailed his business school projects and networking connections, including a promising internship opportunity at a venture capital firm. My father nodded approvingly throughout their updates, occasionally asking informed questions that demonstrated his engagement with their lives. When the conversation inevitably turned to me, I shared news about a successful campaign I'd recently managed for a local restaurant chain that had increased their foot traffic by 30%. That's nice, my mother interjected before I'd finished explaining the creative concept. Kyle, tell Samantha about your professor's comment on your last presentation. And just like that, I was sidelined again. I took a large sip of wine and resigned myself to being a spectator at my own family dinner. The tension in my shoulders had just begun to ease slightly when my mother clinked her glass, calling for attention. We have wonderful news to share, she announced, her face lighting up in a way it rarely did when I was the topic of discussion. Kyle and Melissa are engaged. The table erupted in excitement. My father opened a bottle of champagne he'd apparently had chilling, while Heather immediately began discussing potential wedding venues. I sat frozen, processing both the news and the realization that I appeared to be the only one hearing it for the first time. When did this happen? I asked during a momentary lull. Kyle looked slightly uncomfortable. About 3 weeks ago. I proposed to her parents' lake house. 3 weeks. I repeated. And I'm just hearing about it now. An awkward silence fell before my mother replied. We had a small celebration the weekend it happened. You were busy with work, as usual. The truth hit me. I hadn't been informed, let alone invited. The as usual was just gaslighting, implying my absence had been my choice rather than their exclusion. Congratulations, Kyle. I managed, forcing a smile. Melissa is wonderful. You two are perfect together. That much, at least, was sincere. I genuinely liked Kyle's girlfriend, now fiancé, who had always been kind to me despite my family's dynamic. As the dinner progressed, I learned more about how to the loop I truly was. The engagement ring had been our grandmother's, reset with additional diamonds. A decision made without even mentioning it to me, despite my close relationship with Grandma Johnson before her passing. The wedding was tentatively planned for June at the country club. Melissa's father, Dad's business associate, had already secured the date. When I finally found an opening to share my own good news, a promotion to campaign manager with a significant raise, my announcement landed with all the impact of a feather on carpet. That should help with your student loans, my father commented, before immediately turning to Kyle. Speaking of which, I've set up a meeting with my financial advisor to discuss funding options for your MBA program. The knife twisted. My father had refused to help with my student loans, insisting I needed to learn financial responsibility. Apparently, that lesson was exclusive to middle children. Kyle, perhaps sensing my discomfort, attempted a compliment that came out as condescension. Marketing seems like a fun job. Not too stressful, right? It must be nice having a simple career that doesn't require constant studying like med school or law. I excused myself to the bathroom, hands shaking with suppressed emotion. Once safely behind the locked door, I called Ashley. They're impossible, I whispered harshly after explaining the situation. Kyle's engaged, and they had a celebration without even telling me. And now they're planning this whole wedding like I'm some distant acquaintance who just needs a save-the-date card. That's seriously messed up, Ashley replied, her indignation on my behalf oddly comforting. What are you going to do? What can I do? Cause a scene at dinner? That would just confirm their opinion that I'm the unstable, emotional one. Sam, Ashley's voice turned serious. At some point, you have to stand up for yourself. This isn't just rude, it's emotional abuse. They're treating you like you don't matter. Her words hit home. Years of therapy had helped me recognize the dysfunction in my family, but I still struggled with confrontation, especially with my mother. You're right, I finally said. I can't keep pretending this is normal. Do you want me to come get you? I can be there in 20 minutes. I considered the offer. No. I need to handle this myself. But stay by your phone, okay? Always. Remember, you deserve basic respect. That's not asking too much. I splashed cold water on my face, reapplied my lipstick, and returned to the dining room with a newfound determination. For once, I wouldn't swallow my feelings to keep the peace. For once, I would demand the respect I deserved. When I returned to the table, the conversation had moved on to wedding colors and floral arrangements. My mother was suggesting elegant cream and blush roses, while Heather advocated for something more distinctive. Neither noticed my return until I deliberately pulled out my chair, causing it to scrape loudly against the hardwood floor. I think wildflowers could be beautiful for a June wedding, I offered, trying to join the conversation constructively. They look stunning at the country club with all those windows overlooking the gardens. My mother's lips thinned. Wildflowers are far too casual for a proper wedding, Samantha. This isn't a backyard barbecue. Some wildflower varieties are actually quite sophisticated, I persisted. And they'd be meaningful since Kyle and Melissa enjoy hiking together. I don't think you understand the standards we're aiming for, my mother replied dismissively. This will be the social event of the season. The Wilsons have connections throughout Chicago's business community. The implication was clear. My aesthetic sensibilities weren't refined enough for the occasion. Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. That must be Melissa, my mother said, instantly brightening. She's joining us for dessert. Kyle jumped up to answer the door, returning moments later with his fiancée. Melissa looked lovely in a simple blue dress, her blonde hair pulled back in an elegant ponytail. She greeted everyone warmly, giving me a genuine hug. Samantha, it's so good to see you. It's been ages. Congratulations on your engagement, I said sincerely. I just heard the news. A flicker of confusion crossed her face. Oh, I thought, well, thank you. We're so excited. My mother swooped in, guiding Melissa to a seat beside Kyle. We were just discussing the wedding plans. I've already contacted Marie at the club about the menu options. As coffee and my mother's famous tiramisu were served, the conversation continued to revolve around wedding details. I made several attempts to participate, each one politely but firmly redirected. It was as if I were watching a play where everyone had a role except me. Then came the moment that cracked the facade. Melissa, responding to a question about her maid of honor, said, "My sister will be standing up with me, of course. And Kyle's got his best friend Tim as best man. We're keeping the wedding party small, just siblings and best friends." She turned to me with a warm smile. "We haven't officially asked everyone yet, but I'd love to have you as a bridesmaid, Samantha. You've always been so kind to me." Before I could respond, Heather interjected with a laugh. "Well, you'll have to make sure any dresses are ordered early. Alterations might be tricky with my situation." My mother gasped dramatically. "Heather, we were going to wait to share that news." "What news?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. Heather smiled, placing a hand on her still flat stomach. "Thomas and I are expecting. I'm about 10 weeks along." Another round of excitement erupted. Another major family event I was the last to know about. Another celebration that had apparently already occurred without me. 10 weeks. I said, unable to keep the hurt from my voice. And I'm just finding out now. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. "We wanted to wait until the first trimester was nearly complete," Heather explained, not quite meeting my eyes. "You know, to be safe." "Except everyone else here already knew," I pointed out, looking around the table. Even Melissa nodded slightly, confirming she'd been told. "Don't make this about you, Samantha," my mother said sharply. "This is Heather's news to share when and how she chooses." "I'm not making it about me," I replied, feeling heat rise in my cheeks. "I'm just wondering why I'm consistently the last person to know about major family events. Kyle's engagement, Heather's pregnancy. What else have I missed? Is Dad retiring? Are you moving to Florida? Am I adopted?" "There's no need for sarcasm," my father said, finally entering the conversation. "Your mother's right. This is a happy occasion. It would be happier if I felt like an actual member of this family instead of an afterthought," I said, my voice trembling slightly. My mother's expression hardened. Perhaps if you showed more interest in family matters instead of being constantly absorbed in your own little world, you'd be more included. The injustice of this statement stole my breath. My own little world? Mom, I call you every week. I invite you to every work event. I've tried to share my promotions, my friendships, my whole life with you, and you dismiss everything that matters to me. That's not true, she protested, though weakly. It is true, I insisted, years of suppressed feelings suddenly flooding forth. When was the last time any of you asked about my job? Or my friends? Or anything that matters to me? Kyle gets engaged, and you have a celebration without even telling me. Heather's pregnant, and everyone knows but me. Do you have any idea how that feels? You're being overly sensitive, my mother said. We didn't exclude you intentionally. That's actually worse, I replied. It means you didn't even think of me at all. Kyle shifted uncomfortably. Sam, come on. It's not that serious. It is to me, I said, turning to him. And it should be to you too. We're supposed to be family. We are family, my father interjected, his tone conciliatory but patronizing. But you've always been so independent, Samantha. We thought you preferred it that way. Independent? Or ignored? I challenged. There's a difference between giving someone space and making them feel invisible. My mother's face flushed with anger. This is exactly why we handle things the way we do. You always turn everything into a drama. Heather and Kyle can receive news without creating a scene. Because the news is usually about them, I exclaimed. They're never an afterthought. That's not fair, Heather finally spoke, her tone defensive. We all have different relationships with Mom and Dad. You're right about that. I agreed bitterly. You and Kyle are the accomplished children they brag about. I'm the disappointment they tolerate. Samantha, my mother gasped. How dare you say such things? How dare I speak the truth? I was beyond caring now, years of hurt crystallizing into words I couldn't hold back. Mom, you've compared me unfavorably to Heather since elementary school. Nothing I do is ever good enough. My apartment is in the wrong neighborhood. My job is beneath me. My clothes are inappropriate. My hair is too curly or too straight or too whatever you decide that day. That's ridiculous, she scoffed, but I noticed my father looking down at his plate, avoiding eye contact. Is it? I challenged. When I got promoted last month, which none of you know about because no one asked, my boss said I have exceptional creative talent and leadership potential. But in this house, I'm still the underachiever because I didn't go to an Ivy League school or choose a prestigious enough career. We've only wanted what's best for you, my father said quietly. No, you've wanted what looks best to your friends at the country club, I corrected him. There's a difference. Melissa looked deeply uncomfortable, while Kyle put a protective arm around her shoulders, physically choosing sides. Heather studied her dessert plate with sudden intensity. I think you need to calm down, my mother said icily. You're making a spectacle of yourself and ruining what should be a joyful family dinner. A joyful family dinner, where I'm treated like an unwelcome guest, I replied. Tell me honestly, Mom. If I hadn't been able to come tonight, would anyone have really missed me? Or would it have been easier because you wouldn't have to pretend to be interested in my life? The question hung in the air, met with damning silence. My mother's face transformed, her carefully maintained composure cracking to reveal a fury I'd glimpsed only a few times throughout my childhood. Those rare displays of raw emotion had always terrified me into compliance, but something had fundamentally shifted inside me. I was no longer the little girl desperate for approval. I was a grown woman demanding basic respect. How dare you question our love for you? She hissed, her voice vibrating with anger. After everything we've done, the sacrifices we've made, the opportunities we've provided. Love isn't measured in sacrifice or opportunity, I replied, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. It's in the everyday moments. The listening, the support, the acceptance. Philosophical nonsense, she dismissed. This is exactly why you struggle in the real world, Samantha. You live in some fantasy where feelings matter more than achievement. The comment struck me as so fundamentally revealing of our disconnect that I almost laughed. They do matter more, Mom. At least to me. And that's why Heather is a successful attorney and Kyle is getting his MBA while you're still making advertisements for restaurants, she snapped. The room fell silent. Even my mother seemed to recognize she'd crossed a line. My father cleared his throat uncomfortably. Patricia, he murmured, that's not fair. His weak defense came too late. The damage was done. I'm good at what I do, I said quietly. I help small businesses thrive. I create campaigns that connect with real people. I'm sorry that's not impressive enough for you. It's not about impressive, my mother insisted, though we all knew that was exactly what it was about. It's about living up to your potential. My potential as defined by you, I clarified. Have you ever considered that I might be perfectly happy with my choices? That success might look different to me than it does to you. She scoffed. Convenient rationalization for settling for less. The dismissal triggered a flashback to my 14th birthday. I'd proudly shown my mother a short story that had won a school competition. Instead of congratulating me, she'd frowned at the certificate. Creative writing isn't a practical skill, Samantha. You should focus on subjects that will lead to a real career. When I tried to explain how much writing meant to me, she'd cut me off with those same words. Convenient rationalization for avoiding challenging subjects like math and science. That day, I'd cried in my room for hours. Today, I felt only a cold clarity. You've never respected my choices, I stated, not as an accusation but as a simple fact. You've never respected me. That's not true, my father interjected. We want what's best for you. What you think is best, I corrected. Not what actually makes me happy or fulfilled. My mother's patience finally snapped. Enough. This constant victim mentality is exhausting. You've always been difficult, always required special handling. While Heather and Kyle got on with things, you needed constant reassurance and validation. Because you gave it freely to them and withheld it from me. The truth of this realization hit me with stunning force. My entire childhood, I watched you celebrate their every achievement while minimizing mine. That's absolutely false, my mother declared, though her eyes flickered to my father as if seeking confirmation. Is it? I challenged. When Kyle got a B+ in calculus, you took him out for ice cream because he'd tried his best. When I got an A in English, you asked why I wasn't putting that effort into more important subjects. Kyle had the grace to look uncomfortable. Mom, Sam does have a point. You've always been harder on her. My mother turned on him, betrayal flashing across her face. Don't encourage this behavior. Your sister has always had a flair for the dramatic. That's your response to any emotion you don't want to deal with, I said. Label it dramatic or inappropriate or inconvenient, so you don't have to acknowledge it might be valid. I don't have to sit here and be psychoanalyzed in my own home, my mother declared, standing abruptly. This is absolutely unacceptable. What's unacceptable is how you've treated me for 26 years, I replied, also rising to my feet. What's unacceptable is being excluded from family celebrations and treated like an inconvenience rather than a daughter. My mother's face contorted with rage. You ungrateful child. After everything we've done for you, the opportunities, the education, the support. Support. I echoed incredulously. When have you ever truly supported me? My art, my writing, my career choices. You've criticized every single one. Because we expected more from you, she shouted, abandoning all pretense of composure. Because we knew you could do better than mediocrity. The word hung in the air like poison. Mediocrity. The ultimate indictment in the Johnson family value system. I am not mediocre, I said, my voice low but firm. I am creative, dedicated, and good at what I do. The fact that you can't see that says more about your limitations than mine. My mother's face went white with fury. You're ungrateful. Get out and never come back, she screamed, pointing at the door. If we're such terrible parents, if we've damaged you so deeply with our expectations and opportunities, then go. See how you fare without our support. The room fell into shocked silence. Even my mother seemed startled by her outburst, though she didn't retract it. My father half rose from his chair. "Patricia, she doesn't need to leave." "Samantha, your mother doesn't mean that." But his weak protest only highlighted his perpetual role as peacekeeper rather than protector. Never once in my childhood had he definitively stood against my mother's treatment of me. Why would tonight be different? I looked around the table. Melissa appeared mortified, her eyes wide with shock. Kyle stared at his plate, avoiding eye contact. Heather examined her manicure with sudden fascination. In that moment, with stunning clarity, I saw the truth of my family dynamic. This wasn't love. This wasn't support. This wasn't even normal dysfunction. This was toxic, and it had been poisoning me for years. With a strange sense of calm, I placed my napkin on the table and stood. "I think I will leave. Not because you've ordered me to, but because I finally understand that I deserve better than this." I gathered my purse and jacket, moving with deliberate dignity despite my shaking hands. "If you walk out that door, don't expect to be welcomed back," my mother warned, her voice cold. I paused at the threshold of the dining room and turned. You know what's truly sad? A real family wouldn't require me to earn my place at the table. Love shouldn't be conditional on meeting your expectations. I hope someday you realize what you've thrown away. With those words, I walked through the front door into the cool October night. My legs carried me to my car on autopilot while my mind reeled with the magnitude of what had just occurred. Only when I was safely inside with the doors locked did I allow the tears to come. My hands trembled so badly I couldn't insert the key into the ignition. I pulled out my phone and called Ashley. "I need you," I managed between sobs. I left. She told me to get out and never come back. "I'm on my way," Ashley replied without hesitation. "Go to your apartment. I'll meet you there." The drive home passed in a blur of tears and disbelief. Had I really just been disowned? Had my own mother truly told me never to come back? The words replayed in my mind, each repetition a fresh wound. Ashley was waiting in the lobby of my building when I arrived, her face tight with concern. One look at my expression told her everything. "Oh, Sam," she murmured, pulling me into a fierce hug. "I'm so sorry." Upstairs in my apartment, I recounted the evening between bouts of tears. Ashley listened without interruption, periodically refreshing my tissue supply and making sure my wine glass stayed full. "They're toxic," she concluded when I'd finished. "All of them. Your mother is the ringleader, but your dad and siblings are complicit. They're still my family," I whispered, the reality of what I'd lost beginning to sink in. "Biology doesn't give anyone the right to treat you that way," Ashley insisted. "Family is supposed to build you up, not tear you down." I nodded, too exhausted to argue. Later, curled under a blanket on my sofa, I felt oddly split in two. Part of me was devastated, mourning the loss of the family I'd always hoped we could become. Another part felt a strange liberation, as if I'd finally put down a crushing weight I'd carried for decades. "What do I do now?" I asked Ashley as she prepared to leave, having made sure I was calmer. "You live," she said simply, "on your terms, without their judgment as your soundtrack." That night, I cried myself to sleep, but the tears felt different somehow. Less like despair and more like release. Like the necessary pain of cleaning a wound that had been infected for far too long. The first week after the confrontation passed in a haze of emotional extremes. I'd wake up feeling empowered and liberated, convinced I'd made the right decision in standing up for myself. By afternoon, doubt would creep in, accompanied by waves of grief so intense they left me physically nauseated. Evenings brought anxiety, checking my phone compulsively for messages from my family that never came. "Is it normal to feel this unstable?" I asked Ashley during one of her daily check-in calls. One minute I'm relieved, the next I'm devastated, then I'm furious, then I miss them terribly. "Completely normal," she assured me. "You're grieving, Sam. Not just the relationship you lost, but the one you never had in the first place." That perspective helped. I wasn't just mourning the current estrangement, but the lifetime of conditional love and impossible standards that had preceded it. On day 9, my father finally texted, "Your mother needs time. Let things cool down before reaching out." The message infuriated me. Once again, he was enabling her behavior while placing responsibility on me to fix a situation I hadn't created. I drafted several replies before settling on, "I'm not the one who needs to reach out. I deserve an apology." He didn't respond. 3 days later, Heather texted, "Are you planning to apologize before the wedding? Kyle and Melissa are finalizing the wedding party this weekend." The casual cruelty of her message, no acknowledgement of what had happened, no expression of concern for my well-being, just practical logistics about a wedding, clarified exactly where I ranked in her priorities. I didn't reply. Work became my sanctuary. I threw myself into projects with newfound intensity, channeling my emotional turmoil into creative solutions for clients. My boss, Diane, noticed the change. "Your campaigns have always been good, Samantha, but these latest concepts are exceptional," she commented during our weekly review. "There's a depth to them that really connects." I didn't explain that I was pouring all my unspoken feelings into my work, finding outlets for the anger, hurt, and longing through strategic messaging and evocative imagery. I simply thanked her and asked for more responsibility. A colleague named Justin began to take notice of me as well. Tall, with kind brown eyes and a quiet confidence, he was our department's data analyst, complementing my creative focus with statistical insights. We'd always had a cordial professional relationship, but now he seemed to sense something had changed. "You okay?" he asked one evening as we both worked late, the office mostly empty. "You've seemed intense lately." I considered deflecting with my usual "I'm fine," but something about his genuine concern broke through my defenses. "Family drama," I admitted. "The nuclear kind."
Possibly permanent.
He nodded, not pushing for details. "Been there. My dad hasn't spoken to me since I dropped out of medical school to pursue statistics instead. 5 years and counting." That simple acknowledgement that someone else understood family rejection created an instant connection between us. We ended up talking for hours that night, sharing takeout Chinese food on the office rooftop terrace. Justin became a regular part of my new support system, offering perspective without judgment. By the 3rd week, I realized I needed professional help to process what had happened. I found a therapist, Dr. Laura Peters, who specialized in family trauma and boundary setting. Our first session was revelatory. "What you're describing is a classic golden child/scapegoat dynamic," she explained after I'd shared my family history. "Your siblings were cast as the successful, favored children, while you were assigned the role of family disappointment. These roles have nothing to do with your actual achievements and everything to do with family system dysfunction." "But why me?" I asked, the question that had haunted me for years. What did I do to deserve that role? "Nothing," Dr. Peters said firmly. "Often it's simply about which child's personality or interests least match the parent's expectations or values. Your creative nature may have been threatening to a mother who prioritizes conformity and conventional success." Over the following weeks, therapy helped me identify the unhealthy patterns that had defined my family relationships. I recognized how I'd internalized my mother's critical voice, how I'd learned to seek validation in self-destructive ways, how I diminished my own achievements because they'd never been celebrated at home. Healing doesn't necessarily mean reconciliation, Dr. Peters cautioned during one particularly difficult session. It means recognizing that you didn't deserve the treatment you received and that you don't need validation from toxic people to be worthy. That concept, that I could be whole without my family's approval, was simultaneously terrifying and liberating. I'd spent 26 years trying to earn love that should have been freely given. What would it mean to stop trying? Financially, the estrangement created challenges. I'd been saving for a car but instead used those funds to move to a studio apartment in Lakeview, needing a fresh start away from roommates who'd witnessed my emotional upheaval. The rent stretched my budget thin, but the independence felt necessary for my healing. My new place became a physical manifestation of my emerging identity. I painted one wall a bold teal, something my mother would have dismissed as garish, and displayed my own artwork prominently. I bought plants, experimented with furniture arrangements, and created a space that nurtured rather than judged me. Work continued to be a source of stability and growth. Diane assigned me to lead our team's pitch for a major new client, a regional grocery chain looking to rebrand. The project consumed my evenings and weekends, but the creative challenge provided welcome distraction from my personal turmoil. Justin and I began spending more time together, our professional collaboration evolving into friendship. He'd stop by my office with coffee just when I needed it most, or text random dated jokes that somehow always made me smile. He never pushed for more than I was ready to give, seeming to understand intuitively that I was still healing. I also reconnected with old passions that had been stifled by my family's disapproval. I joined a community painting class, started hiking on weekends, and resumed the creative writing that had once brought me such joy. Each activity felt like reclaiming a piece of myself that had been surrendered in the futile quest for parental approval. My 30th birthday approached, the first I would celebrate without obligatory family dinner. Ashley insisted on planning something special, despite my protests that I'd rather ignore the occasion entirely. "We're reclaiming your birthday," she declared. No more associating it with disappointment. The evening she organized, a sunset boat cruise on Lake Michigan with a small group of friends, became symbolic of my new life. Surrounded by people who genuinely enjoyed my company, laughing freely without monitoring my behavior for potential criticism, I realized I was building something precious, a chosen family. Then, 6 months after the confrontation, came an unexpected text from Kyle. "Can we meet for coffee? Just us." I stared at the message for a long time, emotions warring within me. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to protect the fragile peace I'd constructed. Another part desperately missed my younger brother, despite his complicity in our family's dysfunction. After consulting with Dr. Peters, I agreed to a meeting at a neutral coffee shop halfway between our respective neighborhoods. As the date approached, my anxiety mounted. What did he want? Was he an emissary from my parents, sent to persuade me to apologize? Was he going to disinvite me from the wedding officially? I arrived early, securing a corner table that offered some privacy. When Kyle walked in, I was struck by how tired he looked. The golden boy appeared tarnished, with dark circles under his eyes and tension in his shoulders that mirrored my own. "Thanks for coming," he said, sliding into the seat across from me. "I wasn't sure you would." "I wasn't sure I would either," I admitted, studying my brother's face. Up close, the strain was even more evident. Fine lines around his eyes that hadn't been there 6 months ago, a tightness to his jaw that spoke of chronic stress. We ordered a simple latte for me, an elaborate specialty drink with extra espresso for him, and sat in awkward silence until our beverages arrived. "How are you?" he finally asked, his voice carrying genuine concern that surprised me. I searched for the right word. Surviving? Healing? Rebuilding? "I'm finding my way," I settled on. "How about you? You look tired." Kyle ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I remembered from childhood.
"Yeah, well,
"Things have been intense at home since you left." "I didn't leave, Kyle. I was thrown out." I corrected gently but firmly, a boundary technique Dr. Peters had taught me.
He winced.
"You're right. Poor choice of words." He took a deep breath. "Look, Sam, I owe you an apology. A big one." I sat there and said nothing while Mom treated you horribly. Not just at that dinner, but for years. The acknowledgement was so unexpected that I felt tears spring to my eyes. In all our family conflicts, no one had ever validated my experience so directly.
"Why?"
I asked, the question encompassing far more than that single night. Kyle stared into his coffee. "It was easier," he admitted, shame evident in his voice. "When Mom focused on you, she wasn't focusing on me. And I let that happen because I was scared of becoming the target." His honesty disarmed me. "I always thought you had it perfect. The golden boy who could do no wrong." Kyle laughed, but there was no humor in it. God, no. You have no idea the pressure. Every achievement just raised the bar for the next one. Dad's been hinting I should consider law school after my MBA. When I said I wasn't interested, he suggested I lacked ambition. That sounds familiar, I murmured. There's a lot you don't know, Sam, Kyle continued, his voice dropping.
About our family, about Mom.
Things I've been learning since you left, or got thrown out, rather. Like what? He hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. Mom had a pretty terrible childhood. Her father was extremely critical. Nothing she did was ever good enough. Her mother was passive, never stood up for her. Sound familiar? I nodded, surprised. Our maternal grandparents had died before I was born, and Mom rarely spoke of them. Dad told me this recently. Apparently, Mom's father was particularly harsh about her artistic interests. She wanted to study art history in college, but he forced her into education because it was practical. He called art a hobby for people without real talent. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. My mother's hostility toward my creative pursuits suddenly appeared in a new light. Not simple disapproval, but a projection of her own thwarted dreams and internalized criticism. That doesn't excuse how she treated me, I said carefully. No, it doesn't, Kyle agreed immediately. Nothing could. I'm just trying to understand it myself. He took another deep breath. There's more. Dad nearly left about 10 years ago. What? This was completely new information. When I was in high school,
They seemed fine.
they hid it well. Dad had an apartment for 3 months. He couldn't handle Mom's controlling behavior anymore. They went to counseling, reconciled, but according to Dad, nothing really changed except his decision to make it work. I thought about our father, his emotional absence, his retreat into work, his failure to protect me from Mom's criticism. It made a sad kind of sense. And Heather? I asked, suspecting there were revelations about my seemingly perfect sister as well. Kyle nodded grimly. Heather's been dealing with anxiety and an eating disorder since college. The pressure to maintain her successful image is crushing her. She's been in therapy for years but hides it from Mom because she doesn't want to seem weak. The image of my family was crumbling with each revelation. The perfect facade had concealed so much pain. And you? I asked softly. What's your secret struggle? Kyle's eyes met mine, vulnerability evident. I hate business school. I'm good at it, but I hate it. I wanted to be a teacher, high school math. Can you imagine telling Mom that? That her son wants a mediocre career in public education instead of finance. I could imagine it all too well. So, you're living a life you don't want to please people who can't be pleased. Exactly. He slumped in his chair. And watching you walk away that night. It was terrifying and inspiring at the same time. You did what none of us have had the courage to do. You chose yourself. His words settled over me like a warm blanket. For the first time, I saw my actions not as a failure of family loyalty, but as an act of necessary self-preservation. It hasn't been easy, I admitted. There are days I still question everything, wonder if I overreacted. You didn't, Kyle said firmly. If anything, you underreacted for years. Which makes me an even bigger coward for not standing up for you. You were surviving the only way you knew how, I said, surprising myself with the compassion I felt. We all were. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of these revelations settling between us. So, what happens now? I finally asked, are you here as a family ambassador? Does Mom want me to apologize? Kyle shook his head vehemently. I'm here for me, and for you. I miss my sister, and I need. He hesitated. I need to see that it's possible to break free and survive. The vulnerability in his admission touched me deeply. I'm surviving, I assured him. Some days better than others, but I'm building a life that feels like mine for the first time. That's what I want too, he said quietly. And there's something else. I want you to meet with Melissa. Away from the family. She's been asking about you, worried about you. Melissa? I was surprised. Though I'd always liked Kyle's fiancée, We weren't particularly close.
She saw everything that happened that night.
And let's just say she's had some revelations of her own about the family she's marrying into. Curiosity piqued. I agreed to meet Melissa for lunch the following weekend. That meeting proved even more illuminating than my conversation with Kyle. Melissa, elegant as always, but with the same strain evident in her expression, hugged me tightly when we met at a small bistro near her office.
I've been so worried about you, she said.
That night I've never seen anything like it. I had no idea your family dynamic was so toxic. Welcome to the Johnsons, I said wryly. Still sure you want to marry in? She smiled weakly. That's actually something I wanted to talk to you about. Kyle and I are reevaluating certain aspects of our wedding plans. Over lunch, Melissa revealed how my mother had steamrolled every wedding decision, from the venue to the flowers to the guest list. She insisted we invite business associates I've never met while limiting my college friends because the club has space constraints. More disturbing were her observations about how my parents interacted with each other and with Kyle. Your father defers to your mother on everything, even when he clearly disagrees. And the way she critiques Kyle's every decision, it's subtle but constant. I didn't really notice it until that night with you, but now I can't unsee it. What does Kyle say? I asked. He's conflicted. He wants to please them. It's so deeply ingrained, but he's also starting to question everything. Your leaving created ripples you can't imagine, Samantha. It's like you broke some family spell of silence. She hesitated, then added, I should warn you. Your mother has been telling people you had a mental health episode and needed space from the family. She's controlling the narrative to extended family and friends. Though painful, the information didn't surprise me. It fit my mother's pattern of managing appearances above all else. There's something else, Melissa continued. Kyle told me his father mentioned you'd be welcome to visit him for lunch when your mother is at her charity meetings. He's not ready to openly defy her, but he's creating a small opening. I finished, emotions conflicted. Part of me wanted to reject this covert connection as insufficient. Another part recognized the significance of even this tiny rebellion in our family system. Over the following weeks, a cautious new relationship developed between Kyle, Melissa, and me. We met regularly, always at locations far from my parents' usual haunts. Kyle shared more family history he was uncovering through conversations with our father and estranged relatives. I offered perspective from my therapy insights. Melissa provided the outsider view that helped us see our family dynamics more clearly. During one such meeting, Kyle revealed that our mother had refused therapy despite our father's ultimatum. Dad actually told her he would consider separation if she didn't get help. She said he was being manipulated by therapists who create problems to solve. That tracks, I said, unsurprised. Acknowledging she needs help would mean acknowledging she's not perfect. As Kyle and Melissa navigated their wedding planning, I found myself in the unexpected position of helping my brother establish boundaries with our parents. I shared techniques from my therapy books that had helped me understand family dysfunction, and most importantly, unwavering support when he made difficult stands against our mother's control. How did you find the courage? He asked me one evening after successfully insisting on a smaller, more personal wedding against our mother's objections. To walk away knowing you might lose everything? I considered the question carefully. I think I realized I'd already lost the most important thing, my sense of self. Everything else felt secondary after that. In these conversations, I discovered a strength I hadn't known I possessed. The very experiences that had wounded me had also forged resilience and insight that now helped my brother navigate his own path to authenticity. 4 months after our first coffee meeting, Kyle called with news that Heather had reached out to him, expressing interest in the changes she'd observed in him. She asked if I'm in therapy, he said, excitement in his voice. Not accusingly, but like she's considering it herself. The dominoes are falling. I mused, feeling a complex mix of vindication and sadness. It shouldn't have taken my expulsion from the family to begin breaking these unhealthy patterns, but I was grateful change was happening nonetheless. You started this, Kyle said. By refusing to play your assigned role anymore, you showed us all it was possible to choose differently. His words helped heal something deep within me. The pain of rejection remained, but alongside it grew a quiet pride in the courage it had taken to stand up for myself. Perhaps that, more than any achievement my mother might have valued, was my true strength. 1 year after the fateful family dinner, my life had transformed in ways I never could have anticipated. Professionally, I'd been promoted to creative director at BrightPath, leading a team of 5 and managing our most important client relationships. My campaign for the regional grocery chain had won an industry award, validating my creative approach in the most public way. Personally, the changes were even more profound. Justin and I had begun dating 6 months earlier, our friendship evolving naturally into romance. Unlike previous relationships where I'd hidden parts of myself fearing rejection, with Justin I felt fully seen and accepted. He understood my family history without judgment and supported my healing journey with patience and compassion. My relationship with Kyle had deepened into a genuine friendship. He and Melissa had married in a small ceremony at her parents' lake house, with only 30 guests, none of whom were business associates. I'd stood beside Melissa as a bridesmaid, while our parents had attended as guests with clearly defined boundaries about their involvement. The event had been tense but manageable, a testament to Kyle's growing ability to prioritize his own needs over family expectations. Perhaps most surprisingly, Kyle and Melissa's daughter, my niece Emma, had been born 3 months ago, creating a new generation of our family with the opportunity for healthier patterns. Holding that tiny, perfect baby in my arms, I'd made a silent promise that she would grow up knowing her worth wasn't tied to achievement or appearance or others' expectations. My relationship with Heather had evolved as well, though more tentatively. After Kyle's wedding, she'd reached out with hesitant questions about my therapy experience. Our conversations remained somewhat guarded, but I sensed her gradually recognizing the dysfunction that had shaped us all. She'd begun seeing a therapist herself, though she hadn't yet disclosed this to our mother. As for my parents, the situation was complex. My father had started attending therapy alone, a step that surprised us all. He occasionally invited me to lunch when my mother was occupied elsewhere, our conversations awkward, but increasingly honest. He never explicitly apologized for his role in my childhood, but his consistent effort to maintain connection represented progress I'd never expected. My mother remained the most resistant to change. I'd established minimal, highly structured contact, holiday cards, brief responses to the occasional text, maintaining firm boundaries while leaving the door slightly ajar should she ever choose to walk through it with genuine accountability. Dr. Peters had helped me understand that forgiveness didn't require reconciliation, especially when the harmful behavior continued. My chosen family had expanded beyond Ashley to include colleagues who'd become friends, neighbors in my apartment building, and members of my painting class. Sunday dinners, once a source of dread, became joyful gatherings in my small but welcoming apartment, filled with laughter and acceptance. Then came an unexpected invitation. My father texted asking if I would meet him for dinner, alone, at a restaurant midway between our homes. The formal nature of the request, so different from our casual lunch meetings, signaled its importance. I arrived at the upscale Italian restaurant to find my father already seated, looking both nervous and determined. After ordering, he took a deep breath and began speaking with uncharacteristic directness. "Samantha, I owe you an apology. Not just for that night, but for your entire childhood. I failed you as a father." The words I'd never expected to hear left me momentarily speechless. I should have protected you from your mother's criticism. I should have celebrated your achievements instead of comparing them to your siblings. I should have seen you for the remarkable person you are, not for who we wanted you to be. Tears filled my eyes. "Why didn't you?" I asked, the question I'd carried for years. He looked down at his hands. "Fear, primarily. Fear of your mother's disapproval, fear of conflict, fear of failing as a husband if I contradicted her parenting." I convinced myself staying silent was maintaining peace, when really, I was just avoiding courage. That cost me a lot, I said quietly. It cost us all, he agreed. My relationship with you, your sense of security, our family's health. I'm deeply sorry, Samantha. I know an apology doesn't undo the damage, but I want you to know I recognize it now. The therapy is helping me see things I've been blind to for decades. We talked for hours that night, with more honesty than we'd ever shared. He told me about his own emotionally distant father, his determination to provide financially for his family even at the cost of emotional connection, his gradual awakening to the toxicity he'd enabled. Your mother has been diagnosed with hypertension, he mentioned toward the end of our dinner. Her doctor believes stress is a contributing factor. I tensed, anticipating a request for reconciliation for my mother's health. Instead, he surprised me. I'm not telling you this to pressure you into contact. I respect the boundaries you've established. I just thought you should know, as it's affecting some of her behaviors and choices. Is she considering therapy yet? I asked, already knowing the answer. He shook his head. She sees her health issues as purely physical, not connected to emotional patterns. But she has agreed to meditation for stress management, which is at least a small step. As we parted that evening, my father hugged me, a real embrace, not the awkward pat he'd always offered before. I'm proud of you, Samantha, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Not for what you've achieved, though that's impressive, but for who you are. Your courage, your compassion, your integrity. I hope you can forgive me someday. I'm working on it, I replied honestly. Forgiveness is a process, not an event. He nodded, understanding. I'll keep showing up if you'll let me. Not to earn forgiveness, but because I want to know my daughter. That Thanksgiving, 1 year and 1 month after being told never to return, I hosted a gathering in my apartment. Ashley came with her new boyfriend. Justin arrived early to help cook. Kyle, Melissa, and baby Emma drove in from their new home in Evanston. 2 colleagues from work and my favorite neighbor completed our group. My father stopped by briefly in the afternoon, bringing a pumpkin pie and spending an hour holding his granddaughter and engaging awkwardly but sincerely with my friends. My mother remained absent, a choice I'd made peace with. The gathering wasn't perfect, but it was authentic, filled with genuine affection rather than performance or pretense. Later that evening, after everyone had gone except Justin, I stood at my window looking out at the Chicago skyline, reflecting on the journey of the past year. Penny for your thoughts, Justin said, coming up behind me and wrapping his arms around my waist. I was just thinking about family, I replied. How we're born into one, but we can also create our own. And sometimes heal the one we were born into, he added, nodding toward the refrigerator where a photo of Kyle, Melissa, and Emma was displayed prominently. Partially, I agreed. Some wounds never fully heal, but we learn to live with the scars. The truth was, I still carried grief for the mother relationship I'd never had and likely never would. I still felt twinges of the old pain when achievements went uncelebrated by the people who should have been my biggest cheerleaders. But alongside that grief grew something stronger, self-acceptance, authentic connections, and the freedom to define success on my own terms. My journey had taught me that true love doesn't demand you diminish yourself to deserve it. Real family, whether biological or chosen, creates space for you to become more fully yourself, not less. Breaking the cycle of conditional love had been painful, but necessary not just for me, but potentially for generations to come. As I looked around my modest apartment, filled with evidence of the life I'd built, artwork I'd created proudly displayed, photos of genuine celebrations, books that had guided my healing journey, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for 26 years. The path forward wasn't perfectly clear, but I was walking it with integrity, surrounded by people who valued me for exactly who I was. That, I realized, was the most meaningful success of all. Have you ever had to walk away from a toxic relationship for your own well-being? Or perhaps you've been the bridge to healing in your own family. I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. This journey has taught me that sharing our experiences helps others feel less alone in their struggles. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and growth. And if you know someone who might need to hear this message today, please share it with them. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, you deserve to be valued exactly as you are.